Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Samantha Subin. I'm a markets and technology reporter at CNBC. I cover artificial intelligence. I'm going to be moderating our panel today about AI and large language models, which have become one of the most important topics of the moment. It's very early stage, but we have investment firms, companies from healthcare giants to industrial companies figuring out new ways to implement large language models to improve efficiencies, streamline their processes, and cut costs. But not every large language model is destined to succeed. And that's going to be the key question we're going to answer today with our panel. So we have 4 panelists with us today, each stemming from very different industries, backgrounds, all related to AI. We'll start by giving them a minute or so to introduce themselves, share some of their relevant experience, and then we'll head into some of the questions. So do you want to take it away? Start us off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Richa Singh. I am Director and Head of Data and AI at Lexington Partners. Lexington Partners is in private equity secondaries market. Before working for here, I was at Goldman Sachs for over a decade, doing a lot of data science, machine learning, like early age before it became the fancy AI. And latest, I was leading the Center of Excellence for Investment Banking AI at Goldman Sachs. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dariush Lakab. I am the Chief AI Officer for Ascendion. We are a platform-based services company. Prior to Ascendion, I spent a little over 2 years at NVIDIA working on autonomous vehicles infrastructure. I've also had some stint at JPMorgan Chase in their AI and machine learning group, at Google, at Microsoft, at Twitter, things like that. Thrilled to be here.
Hi, I'm Robert Ciemniak. I'm visiting from Hong Kong. I'm the founder of Robotic Online Intelligence, or ROI, where we automate market research on an enterprise SaaS platform, primarily for data companies and investment firms. But unusually, I also run an independent research firm focused on China housing. So our experience has been about automating things for ourselves first, and then pushing it out. So the theme is building your army of robo-analysts on the LLM side.
Harry Mandel. I'm with the New York Federal Reserve. I'm a data architect there, and I'm also a co-chair of the Innovation Roundtable for AI and on the steering committee for AI implementation throughout the Federal Reserve System. My background in AI goes all the way back to grad school, where I did a thesis in artificial intelligence and computer vision. Went on to do some interesting work in computer music, worked with the Unix team at Bell Labs, and then ended up in Wall Street, as I guess all most of us here have, doing algorithmic trading and high-frequency trading at various places, including Morgan Stanley, Carlyle Group, and some other smaller hedge funds. Now, I'm at Federal Reserve, and the constant theme throughout my career was data and algorithms, and I had been working in natural language processing, which led into the way large language models work. So that's my background. To say so, they require me to say that everything I say from now on is my views and not the Federal Reserve's.
Well, thank you all for that. I think the best place for us to start is maybe with what has worked. So if you all could maybe share a use case implementing large language model deployment that has been successful, I think that would be a good place for us to kind of kick this off. Maybe Robert, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So in our experience, the large language models are good by definition in understanding the structure of the language. And therefore, classification, summarization, data extraction is the areas where they really work. Maybe not as exciting as signal detection, but these are the most proven cases. So a few quick examples. You could get the machine to study thousands of open source intelligence articles in Chinese or reports in Chinese to distill the anecdotes about how local markets are or are not responding to the latest stimulus measures. This may not be a quantitative metric, but it would be prohibitively expensive to do as a human. So that's one example. But that could also be that you monitor 40 major central banks globally, including all the Feds and and whatever they are saying, not what's written and published, and many people focus on that, but more the weak signal from some side conference talk by a Fed governor and the expressed thoughts on inflation in academic context. That's the interesting signal. So picking up those it's now much more doable. You could have an analyst looking at FTX bankruptcy proceedings, hedge fund analysts, and you have thousands of files there, and maybe this legalese could be translated into human speak with an LLM. That's another use case we've seen. In the UK, we have a wealth of documents like UK Companies House, kind of a bit like a SEC filings here, where there was a goldmine of data in image PDF format, but LLMs can read it better, extract financial data, or compare documents where Google DeepMind discloses their financials there. So these are a few examples. They're less exciting in terms of prediction, but they really work.
So I can give two examples. I'll give one from the Federal Reserve and one from some past work I did in signal detection. But at the Federal Reserve, we use language models for a bank examination. As you know, we get hundreds of thousands of documents, which we have to look to see if various risks exist in different banks and if things are being remediated and so on. And we found language models to be excellent at doing searching and classification and statistics on these problems, including finding new risks as they crop up because people start discussing them. And then you can see that. And it was particularly effective during the lockdown when our examiners couldn't go on premises to banks and had to just receive PDFs and were overwhelmed having to go through it on their own, and keyword search wasn't adequate. The great thing about the language model is you can search for ideas and concepts, not just particular words. Now, I know you're all interested in signal detection, so one of the things that I did with language models before coming with the Fed is used it to look at social media and also aggregated the data by where people worked. So you could see what everyone was saying, say at Amazon, or what everyone was saying at Google, or what everyone was saying at Facebook. And then you could do a psychometric analysis and see if there's positive emotion or negative emotion, so it can go beyond sentiment. And it was particularly effective with drug companies identifying approvals that hadn't been announced and things like that.
I think these are some really good examples. I will speak on behalf of financial industry. I think I would just add what Harry was saying. We have bunch of unstructured data, which is mostly in the PDF format. Often there is no standardization. So it has historically been taking a lot of the human effort to analyze those and to do all the analysis, due diligence work. And that's where one place I feel like AI can make major difference. And also I'm seeing is one, which is not a use case, but I'm seeing it's a mindset change, is earlier, whenever as a technologist, if you go to any of the stakeholders, and I'm talking about the business partners or people who are purely in business, they're old school thoughts are there, and you have to chase them to convince that, hey, this is the latest technology and let's just use them, implement in our workspace. And suddenly with AI, the whole direction is different. Stakeholders are chasing us. We want AI. We want AI in XYZ domain. We want AI as much as possible. And I feel like with that, more and more use cases are just coming in every day.
So I echo the use cases that you have all mentioned. I'll put them in the bucket of knowledge management, kind of letting the LLM understand and make sense of a whole bunch of diverse data, and then you would be able to actually ask very interesting questions from it. But another area that I have seen quite a bit of success using large language models is around legacy code modernization. We still have quite a bit of old legacy code in the enterprises. And it's becoming quite a bit harder to find folks who can understand those legacy languages and maintain them and fix bugs on them and everything else. And we all know how much it actually costs to get those legacy codes and then try to modernize it into something more modern, something that actually runs in the cloud or something else. LLMs can actually do quite a bit of help to software engineers in that area. And we are seeing some very concrete use cases in those worlds with very high ROIs right now. So,
great, thank you all. So we've heard a lot about some of the ways that large language models are helping companies. I mean, it seems to be in the news every day. I think something a lot of people are curious about is what doesn't work and how we overcome those issues. I know you guys all come from a range of industries, but maybe they're similar throughout, maybe they're different. If you could touch on that.
Yeah, so I would start. I think there are a couple of things everyone need to be careful about when going this route is, number one is, we spoke about use cases. Not every use case is AI use case. If you have an option to go, deterministic route, something which can be directly fetched from API, always build a model that modular that you can get it directly from API and not use AI. And if I talk about AI, one thing we are realizing, and this actually happened within the same year. Like earlier this year, we were talking about RAG is the golden pill for everything, but now what we are realizing is RAG is not the solution for everything. A lot of things that doesn't work is, one of the things is latency. RAG, if just for everyone's knowledge, it's retrieval augmented generation. So the whole concept is we are sending a query, but we will just retrieve the information from internal database, and then we are just going to send it to LLMs. But there is a whole latency around it. There is a, what do you say, a stochastic aspect of it, which is not working very well in RAG. And then, the fine tuning and few other aspects is like knowledge ingestion. Now the post-training is coming, which are better solutions. So I think it's just constantly evolving, but there are few things which are as is. People have been trying to do last, 1 year, 1.5 years. They're finding that it's not working that way.
So I think RAGs are awesome, but I agree with you. I think the latency and some of the other operational factors is limiting kind of RAGs a little bit. And this is where everyone comes and says, okay, what if I can actually fine-tune my own model? What if I actually get this large language model and fine-tune it to my use case? Technically, it works, and it is great. But the part of it that doesn't work is that in order for you to fine-tune a model, you need a lot of data. You need clean data. You need labeled data. You need all those magical things that goes with data that still costs a lot, and it is still not fully existent in all the enterprises. So although fine-tuning models is great and it works, I think we are being limited by the quality of our clean data in that area.
I would particularly echo the last two things and what Darius said about the data. So for all the excitement about senior data scientists in the room, I think it's more about senior data janitors that are more needed in reality. But there's another fundamental issue with things like retrieval augmented generation that creates a lot of excitement, or even with graph added to that and all those latest developments, is that they work great in a demo setting and great when you do very specific use case deployment. But I would say they don't generalize well. So to deploy some of those methods, you need several dozen parameters you can optimize for particular use case. And the optimization for another use case would require a very different setup. And the other great irony of LLMs is that actually the biggest thing that needs to be done is very deterministic in setting up the structure right, or even like document metadata and so on. So to me, the single biggest issue is this general application versus use case specific deployment.
Yeah, my opinion on this is that RAG will only take us so far. And what people will ultimately end up doing, and it's not cost effective today, but will be in the future, is doing much more extensive, more than fine tuning, not starting from scratch, but starting from a tuned model and taking it much further by putting it through a training cycle, which includes all the data within the enterprise. To do that today would cost tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's much more than what people mean when they say fine tuning. But as things scale, as the algorithms get more efficient, as the GPUs become less expensive, I would think that within 5 years that will be feasible, and it will solve a lot of problems because you'll end up getting something which has the same behavior as something like ChatGPT does on public data with your internal data. But that's off in the future. Another thing, which I don't think will be solved so easily, is people expect AI to have a certain amount of wisdom, which it doesn't have. So an example I like to give is, would you trust a language model to tell you whether you should marry someone or not? Or, I think, just think about that for a minute. Or if you would go into a merger, or if you would, any large decision-making process which requires the incorporation of more than what logic and reasoning these models have now. And people, not everyone realizes that, and they expect it to be a source of intelligence, and sometimes people conflate the amount of knowledge that it has with its ability to reason. And reasoning is improving a little bit with chain of thought, and the O1 model shows that, but it's still not at the point where I would say it's anywhere near wisdom. So we have to be careful to make sure people don't look at it as a decision maker for them.
And I would maybe throw a specific example on this in the multimodality. So imagine you have research firm who has 10,000 charts produced over years, and anybody who is in that sector can relate, oh, where is that chart we did 6 months ago, and nobody can find it, right? Because you can't search for charts. So you can use multimodal LLMs to, now if you try to use them to read the charts and give you interpretation of the data, it generates absolute nonsense. It just doesn't work. But if you ask the LLM to, in a standard format, to get the description of what it represents in a self-described way with keywords, without any reasoning, it does an amazing job. Then you can take that text data into your RAG or other database and make it searchable. Yeah. So to some degree you can go there, but not the reasoning part.
That's a great example. Yeah.
So Harry, you touched on this a bit, but I guess the question I would have is whether some of these issues now are going to be non-issues a couple years down the road, once we have more developed large language models, once there's more information out there. What do you all think of this?
Well, I think that being able to do, say, the dream that people have with RAG systems, in other words, have enterprise data, ask a question, get the right answer in terms of retrieval, will be possible and will naturally grow as these things evolve. I don't see the wisdom part or the actual reasoning part happening anytime soon. I think in a strict mathematical context, they've been shown to be able to do some reasoning, some problem solving. But I don't think it would be something you'd want to trust with any kind of fiduciary responsibility.
Well, just one example on RAG still. So we kind of hacked RAG a bit using, we call it regexy RAG. And don't underestimate the power of good old-style deterministic methods. Sometimes, use a regular expression to just find the right chunks. You don't need vector database, any of those, if you do it on a small scale and specific use cases. That obviously doesn't work at a large scale, but there are some small-scale solutions available that are not so heavy on AI.
I personally think that the issues that we are bringing up with difficulties in parsing multimodal types of data and putting in the RAG, yes, that exists today, but I think that is an amazing place for innovation to actually happen within the next few years, so that extracting that type of data from those multimodal type of settings becomes ultimately a non-issue. And I look forward to see what Silicon Valley can come up with that within the next few years.
My opinion is I feel like a small language model will start taking bigger space, because now there is a cost angle to it, there is an environmental angle to it of training and running large language model. And also it's all these products which started as 100% AI product, and we are building AI, everything is AI driven right now. I feel in coming years it will be much more integrated. And I think what the whole panel we all agree to is, and when I say integrators, the AI use cases, the AI aspect, that will be taken care of by AI. Rest of it will be simple. It could be pure Python code. It could be pure APIs. So we would come AI as a more, integrated in this space when we speak about a product development. Also, when we talk about the workflows and day-to-day life of an enterprise, I feel like the AI agents will also have those smaller plays. But in future, we would see how we see the large language model as a big chunk. It will be much more broken down. And if I have to visualize, it will be just small pieces integrated in our life and just doing all those, what we call as expertise on your fingertips that we will all have.
So which industries are leading right now with this deployment in the real world, and how do you see that changing in the next couple years, next 5 years, next decade down the road?
You know more industries than all of us.
So I actually see quite a bit of, I would say, out-of-the-box thinking in the tech industry as to where we will take small language models or how do we actually solve some of the limitations around RAG. But one thing that I actually see almost every day is from the leaders in the financial services industry. They are asking us very, very interesting and I would say spot-on type of questions about return on investments on these generative AI-based applications and use cases. Now, financial services industry, of course, is a highly regulated industry for all the right reasons, and these are the folks who are ultimately putting or holding our toes, the technology folks' toes to the fire. But I think they are asking some very, very interesting questions right now. I wish I would have seen the same level of interesting questions being asked by financial services industries like 12 years back when we were talking about cloud and public cloud and hosted and things like that. I wasn't hearing it then, but right now I'm actually hearing some very interesting questions there. So I'm really excited to see how financial services will evolve very soon using LLMs and Gen AI.
Yeah, I can actually vouch to that on the financial industry aspect of it. And along with it's like the return on investment basically for Gen AI solutions. Another thing is what you touch base is like regulations. If there is everybody wants Gen AI, but there is also the whole thought of holding people back is on how regulated it is. What is the safety around my data? Is my data crossing the boundaries? Can we get things in premise? That question, if it is solved together, so I feel like financial industry on that line can actually benefit a lot from Gen AI space.
Outside of the financial industry, because I think we've covered that pretty well with the other panelists, there's tremendous progress being made in health care in all different kinds of ways. The vast amounts of information that's being used. I mean, one of the Nobel Prizes that was given out, the Nobel Prize in chemistry this year, was for AlphaFold and the work that was done with that. And the pharmaceutical companies are using AI to develop new therapies and new drugs, and at the same time analyze data. I don't know if everyone's aware of this, but there's been a huge data explosion in biology, in molecular biology, in bioinformatics. And they have devices which can monitor intercellular communication, so you can in real time see how a cancer tumor can defeat the immune system, almost like you're debugging a computer program. And this information is so voluminous it can't possibly be understood without something like a language model. They've also trained language models on DNA sequences, so you can actually get to generate new DNA sequences which are useful for experimentation and understanding how things work. I think astronomy as well, there's all kinds of things going on in terms of data processing. You've all seen these images of black holes and things like that, which is all advanced technology which uses similar types of algorithms to language models. Not quite language models, but they use the GPUs, they use signal processing, and all of this is going to create a huge explosion in science and technology.
I think generalizing that, there was some initiative recently in terms of, you talk about pharma, but more generally in terms of academic papers or basically large language models applied to study scientific papers to draw some new patterns, connections, especially you graph it out and develop some new relationship, new links between topics.
Yeah.
And I will touch base one more industry. It's like the education, I feel like, especially the younger kids and how the information is available right away. And I'll give example of my 7-year-old who will just use the ChatGPT, ask any question. The voice is like, hey, I want to learn about the Nile River and Egypt, and all the information is right there available. He doesn't have to go to library and all those things. So I think it's very transformational in multiple industries right now. Education, just wanted to add.
So what LLMs are you all looking towards next, respectively, to help solve for your clients or for your own work? And what problems, I know you began to touch on this in financial industry, but what problems aren't being solved using LLMs that should be or can be at some point?
The Federal Reserve is very concerned about data security. So one of the things that limit a lot of the things we can do is we won't allow the data to go outside of our virtual networks that we have in the cloud. And that stops us from, for example, for using something like the OpenAI's APIs, which I would like to be able to use because they have some of the best models. So now we use ones which you can download and control the data completely, such as the ones from Meta. And other companies are doing it as well. And I think that's a big issue for anyone that has data security worry.
Security is one thing, but even just control, right? So I also see even the trend towards on-device LLMs that are more doable today. But I would bring up another meta issue or meta problem here, which is every week there is some new launch, there's some new model or new framework, new toolkit, new buzzwords, some of them rehashing the previous ones. So the bigger challenge is either for ourselves or for clients, how do you keep up? Because whatever you deploy in 3 months will be obsolete by the time you deploy it. So we're looking to kind of the frameworks for more of the orchestration layer of how to handle all of these and basically to focus on what doesn't change. So certain workflow components, and there will still be a decision at the Fed of certain steps will be taken regardless how it's done, right? Or portfolio manager will follow certain steps. And stick to that and just think how to plug in all the latest and bestest.
Right. Yeah, I mean, imagine you're relying on one of these for signal detection in a trading system, and they change it without telling you, and now all of a sudden you're not making the same profits you were. So you need to be able to control the models. And that's what I think you were referring to. When you download them, you can archive it, and it doesn't change.
But then, of course, you need the skill set and the sophisticated people to be able to maintain that.
Yeah.
So I think actually I echo the point that you made. I think building a level of abstractions between the LLMs and the use cases so that you can manage it effectively is paramount to actually build it everywhere. In fact, the way that we are thinking about it is that it is not just a model. It is a tuple of the model, the prompt, the context that you give it, and also the guardrails that you need to build around it, and you need to manage this tuple as a whole. By the way, another thing that I believe it is not being fully solved today, but we are moving towards actually solving it fairly well within the next few years, are these concepts of agentic workflows and these agents that they can ultimately reason about which part of the task is done, which one it is not, and they go and independently kind of getting it done. So I foresee us seeing a lot of innovation in that area within the next few years.
No, I'll just add in here is like, when we are talking about the whole control aspect of it and safety aspect of it, especially it's more applicable to large enterprises. I see all those enterprises, and many of them are already going in direction is having very opinionated architecture. And this is for the agility purpose. And as we spoke about, it's like things are changing much faster than any of the previous technologies. So we have to just, if everyone imagine in an organization is doing their own thing, and if regulations are changing, new governance is changing, or just the underlying model is changing, it will be very hard to make changes or keep up with them in that case. So it's very important that there is a framework kind of thinking. There is a centralized model where the whole organization can move together at much faster pace for any changes. Yeah.
Yeah, data, simple databases are going to change. I think one of the things which hit me as a surprise and started me thinking, as I read an article recently that LinkedIn had to change some of their ways they're using language models and GPUs because they were actually using that type of structure to match people with jobs. And start to think about that. You mean they're not using a database, and they're sort of not anymore. And it's morphing. The concepts of what we're calling a database is morphing in the vector databases and beyond that. And it has to change the way that the GPUs work internally to make this efficient. And before you know it, the whole concept that we have of a database could completely morph into something else.
And then the dependencies, so when you talk about, we talk about the, say, RAG depends on data, but those agents that everybody's excited about, this agentic future, the agents will depend on RAG. So you can see the potential issue, like if we jump too far ahead without solving the basic structures.
Absolutely.
So we have about 2 minutes left. I want to pose one last question. We obviously have an election coming up that could really play into tech regulation and some other important things necessary for bringing these large language models to fruition. Do you see any risks ahead with that regard?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the two most public figures that completely changed their allegiance from the Democratic candidate to the Republican one is Vance and Elon Musk. And they're both in technology. They both worked with Peter Thiel in the past. And they've both had trouble with regulators. So do I see any risk?
I'm visiting. I'm flying back on November 6th, just before. So.
So I let the politics part of it to other folks who know a lot more about it. But I ultimately think that it is going to be the industry that will ask technology firms very interesting questions so that we can continue to solve the right problems for the industry. So will there be regulations towards left or right or middle or northwest, southwest? I don't know, but I definitely believe that that we will continue to innovate regardless of who ultimately gets into the White House. And yeah, move forward from there.
I would just add is like we are in a stage where even the government can't ignore AI. So I'm expecting something to change in that space. But also it's like I think last week we saw this viral thing was going on. It's like we had the King of Netherlands and CEO of NVIDIA sharing the stage, launching the Netherlands mega computer, and the words were, "I'm not the only king on this stage. There is another king who is wearing leather jacket." So it's like, it's not just like I'm talking about the monarchies and democracies all over the world. They are recognizing the value of AI. And I am expecting whoever next government is coming should have more additional investment and talk about the AI governance around.
Great. Well, so that wraps up our panel. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.